We spent the summer focusing on budget-friendly comics, whether your budget was $100, $50, or $20, but now it's time to throw caution to the wind and get to the big one. The top 10 that is unencumbered by things like financial responsibility or affordability. The top 10 that can prompt reactions from your significant other like, you paid how much for a comic book? What the hell were you thinking? Or, something like that. That said, we're gonna stay here on Earth. Nobody enjoys a video with the hot new collecting tip of, buy Action Comics 1, it's a sure thing. But let's also get off the hamster wheel of ASM 300, Hulk 181, the Star Wars flavor of the week, and all the other usual suspects, and get adventurous with my top 10 comics for the summer of 2023. Kicking off the list in the number 10 spot is a little something spooky courtesy of Archie Comics. Our number 10 book is Pep Comics 155. Cover dated for June 1962, Pep 155 features a classic eerie cover, which isn't what you'd usually expect to find in a 1962 Archie comic. The giant full moon, the crooked and bare tree, and the lady in the cat suit all kind of give this issue a big-time Halloween feel. Cover artist Bob White had actually been building up to this creepy cover for a few issues, though. The artist began incorporating science fiction themes, beginning with the November 1961 issue of Pep, issue 151, which depicts Archie and Reggie going on a blind date with two alien girls. Every issue from Pep 151 to 158 featured either unearthly aliens, a mysterious UFO, haunting ghosts, or some seductive cat lady masquerading in the light of the full moon. As Silver Age Archie books go, Pep 155 is one of the few issues to demand a price tag of hundreds of dollars that doesn't include a first appearance. Recent sales on eBay for low to mid-grade copies have run between $140 and $228. Now, for a truly high-grade copy, I wouldn't be surprised to see a price upwards of $1,000 for this issue, as the popularity of this cover has increased in recent years. But the CGC census remains extremely low, with just 19 copies graded as of the recording of this video. In November 2022, a CGC 8.0 sold for $709, and the most recent sale was for a CGC 4.5 that went for $361. Falling in at the number 9 spot is a Bronze Age classic that deals with the fallout of the untimely demise of a major character in the issue before. Our number 9 book is Amazing Spider-Man 122. This July 1973 issue is where it all goes bad for Green Goblin fans like me. Following Gwen Stacy's unfortunate unaliving at the end of ASM 121, our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is in rage mode as his battle with the Green Goblin carries over into this second issue. The body count would tick higher yet before this one wrapped up though, as the Green Goblin would fall on his own bat glider in one last attempt to take out Spider-Man. As with the previous story, which was titled The Night Gwen Stacy Died, Jerry Conway wrote this tale titled The Green Goblin's Last Stand. For the art duties, John Romita Sr. turned in the cover, while Gil Kane was responsible for the interior pencils. Raw, high-grade copies of ASM 122 will run you right in the neighborhood of $500, but for the same money, or maybe even a little less, you can land a graded 8.5 copy. And with a census count that it's loaded with 6,553 copies of this issue, and interestingly enough, 8.5 is the most common grade for this book with 700 copies in grade. If you have upwards of $1,000 to throw at a copy, you can expect to bring home one of the 477 9.4 copies that are currently on the census. I'm a big fan of first cover appearances, especially when the character in question did not appear on the cover of their first appearance issue. A great Silver Age example of this is our number 8 book, Green Lantern number 9. After debuting in Green Lantern 7, Sinestro, arguably the greatest Green Lantern villain there is, makes his second appearance and finds his way onto the cover as well. This November-December 1961 issue was drawn by Gil Kane inside and out, while John Broome scripted the issue's 2 primary stories. The cover story was titled The Battle of the Power Rings and sees Sinestro wielding his new yellow power ring to attack several different Green Lanterns and then ultimately the Guardians of the Universe. Sooner or later, Warner Brothers may figure out a way to recover from the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, and Sinestro's early appearances may increase in popularity and value, but unfortunately, that's just not where we're at right now. Looking at GPA, we're red across the board for the 90-day average sales price, but there have only been 5 sales in that time frame. Looking at the 12-month average, there's a bit more green than red, but when you dig into the data, you'll find a lot of price compression, as less than a couple of $100 separate the most recent sale of a CGC 1.5 and a CGC 6.5. A CGC 7.5 copy of Green Lantern 9 sold for $625 this month, which is more than $100 below the 12-month average, but still about a 50% bump compared to the 2021 average sales price. Mid-grade raw copies will run you between $400 and $500 based on recent eBay sales, which seem like terrible buys when you compare them to the most recent sales of graded copies. Long story short, this book seems really affordable to me right now, and I think it's a great time to look into picking it up if you want to add a little Green Lantern to your collection. Powering its way in at the number 7 spot is Luke Cage in Hero for Hire number 1. Published in June 1972, Hero for Hire 1 is the first appearance and origin story for Marvel's first headlining black superhero, Luke Cage. As the story unfolds, we meet a number of notable members of Cage's supporting cast, and if you caught the Netflix Luke Cage show, you're likely to recognize a few of these other characters debuting here as well, specifically characters such as Diamondback, Comanche, and Shades. Most of the credit for creating Luke Cage goes to Roy Thomas and John Romita Sr., with a splash of Stan Lee in there for good measure. While Romita provided the cover art and some interior touch-ups, Thomas, who was about to succeed Stan Lee as Marvel's editor-in-chief at the time, did not write the issue's story. That responsibility fell on Archie Goodwin, while the majority of the interior art was actually from George Tuska. As with most Bronze Age keys, values for Hero for Hire number 1 are pretty well in the toilet right now. With the exception of the 2.5 grade, every single slabbed grade is currently averaging lower than the 2021 average sales price as of the recording of this video. Translation: this book is corrected hard, and if it got away from you during the boom, it's a great time to give it another look. High-grade copies are tough to find due to that extremely unforgiving deep brown picture frame cover, so there's a steep ramp up in price above 8.5. But even so, the 90-day average sales price for a CGC 9.0 copy is just over $1,100. If you drop down to an 8.0, the 90-day average sales price is just $526, which seems like a great value to me, as it wasn't very long ago that mid-grade raw copies were selling at prices comparable to the current graded 8.0 price. Digging into the numbers, it seems like we're starting to find the bottom, or at least space near the bottom, for a lot of books that were overextended during the FOMO runs of 2020 and 2021. It may be time to give books like Hero for Hire 1 and the like a little attention again, if you intend on adding them to your collection. When a creator becomes synonymous with the characters they write or draw, you know you're in for some classic comic book material. Few instances of this will ever reach the status of the relationship the creator and subjects of the number 6 book, 4-Color 189, share. While so many of us know Donald Duck, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and Uncle Scrooge from Disney cartoons, when it comes to the comics, they became known as Barks Ducks, and Barks for a time was known only as the Good Duck Artist. Carl Barks is a legend in every sense of the word. How legendary is he, you might ask? Carl Barks was in the inaugural class of the Will Eisner Award Hall of Fame alongside Eisner himself and Jack Kirby. He was a superstar in the comics industry years before anyone even knew his name, since most Disney material only carried Walt Disney's name, not those of the individual creators on the issue. 4-Color 189 was published in June 1948, and it made the list for one particular reason. This is Carl Barks' first ever cover art. Now, he'd been drawing Donald Duck in comics for nearly 6 years at that point, so it's kind of crazy to think that it took so long before he was given a shot at the cover. So, for the very first time, from cover to cover, this book was 100% Carl Barks. In addition to that, 4-Color 189 is also the second appearance of Uncle Scrooge, a character that Barks had debuted 6 months prior in the classic story Christmas on Bear Mountain. The challenge with 4-Color 189 is finding a decent copy to pick up. Like most comics geared towards kids, these things had a pretty hard life, making mid-grade or better copies tough to track down. Looking at GPA, there have only been 4 sales in the last 12 months, ranging from a CGC 4.0 that sold for $206 in December 2022 to a CGC 9.0 copy that sold in November 2022 for $3,600. A nice looking raw copy described as a 4.0 or a 4.5 recently sold on eBay for $175, and another raw copy that appeared to be in the 2.5 to 3.0 range sold for just $31, which was a really good deal. Long story short, this book isn't going to help you retire down the line, but by adding a copy of books like 4-Color 189 to your collection and knowing their significance, it helps pay tribute to a very influential comic creator and puts a bit of comic book history in your longs or shorts. Swinging into the top 5 is a book I picked for a kind of sad reason. Our number 5 pick is Daredevil, number 16. As you're likely aware, John Romita Sr. recently passed away, and it's no secret around here that not only am I a massive SpiderMan fan, but also that JRSR Spidey is my absolute favorite. And what better way to look back on Romita's contribution to Old Webhead than to take it all the way back to their very first encounter in Daredevil number 16. By the spring of 1966, it was painfully clear around Marvel offices that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were just a ticking time bomb. They didn't speak to each other, and each of them seemed to be steering Spider-Man in opposite directions. Seeing the writing on the wall that Ditko would likely depart the Amazing Spider-Man title in the near future, Stan greenlit a Spider-Man crossover in the Daredevil title that John Romita had been drawing since issue 12, following the exit of Wally Wood. The test came with the May 1966 issue number 16 of Daredevil, and it was apparently a success as Spidey guest starred in the following issue in June 1966, and shortly thereafter, Romita took over the art duties on ASM with August 1966 ASM number 39. Generally speaking, it looks to be a good time to pick up a copy of DD16, as prices in grade seem to be below their 2021 counterparts, or worst case, dead even. In the last 90 days, the grade with the highest number of sales is CGC 5.5 with 6 sales. The most recent sale earlier this month was for $248, while the average 90-day sales price across those 6 sales is $255. When you move up to 8.0, which has seen 5 sales in the most recent 90 days, the average sales price comes in at $776, while the most recent sale just a few days ago as I'm recording this video was for $591. That was a great buy, and it's currently the lowest sale year to date for 2023 in grade. Superman's a tough nut to crack when it comes to comic collecting, or at least I think so. His first appearance is literally the most expensive comic book there is. His first solo title issue is the first ever solo title comic in history, and is in the top 5 most expensive comics as well. You just can't win if you're a Superman fan. So let's get a little crazy and check out a book that brings us the first appearance of a major piece of Superman's lore, as most people tend to know it. Our number 4 book is Superman 61, the first appearance of Kryptonite. Debuting all the way back in the November-December 1949 issue of Superman, Kryptonite was originally depicted as a red gem in Swami Riva's turban. The Swami hexes Superman, who's under the influence of kryptonite, and begins to weaken. Naturally, the Swami's next move after he realizes that he can cause Superman to malfunction is to start renting himself out to the shady characters around Metropolis. The next thing we know, Supes fires up an episode of This Is Your Life starring Kryptonite, tracing it back to a meteorite, then trailing the meteorite's path back to Krypton, and then it leads into a minor retelling of Superman's origin, only this time he's made aware of his own origin story. It would take nearly 2 more years before Kryptonite would take on its classic green appearance in August 1951's Action Comics 161. The cover for Superman 61 was provided by Wade Boring and had absolutely nothing to do with the story we've been discussing, which was titled Superman Returns to Krypton. The story was actually written by Bill Finger of Batman fame and was drawn by Al Plastino. I was surprised to find 3 raw sales on eBay, with 1 sale taking place in each of the last 3 months, and prices ranged from $250 for VG range copies to $750 for a copy that was described as fine minus. On the graded side, we've had 10 sales in the last 12 months across all grades, which is pretty decent for a golden age issue like this. The 2 most recent sales both took place in May, with a CGC 1.8 copy selling for $261, while a CGC 8.5 copy sold for $3,000. March 2023 also saw a pair of sales, with a CGC 4.5 selling for $617 and a CGC 6.5 selling for $978. If you're a Superman fan and don't have a Brinks truck to back up for that Action or Superman one, check out books like this one or the first appearance of the Fortress of Solitude and so on. There are plenty of ways to collect these massive legacy characters. You just have to find the way that works best for you. Before there was Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen, the hot new Marvel character of the new millennium was X-23. And here in the number 3 spot, we have her first appearance in NYX3. Cover dated for February 2004, NYX3 was part 3 of the mature content miniseries that spanned a total of 7 issues from late 2003 into 2004. X-23, whose real name is Laura Kinney, was originally presented as a female clone of Wolverine, but her origin story has since been tweaked around, and her current background is that she's actually Wolverine's biological daughter. Artist Joshua Middleton handled both the cover and interior pencils for this one, while Marvel's then editor-in-chief Joe Quesada wrote the story. In the nearly 20 years since X-23's debut, she's now headlined multiple series of her own, attended Xavier's Academy, been assigned to the X-Force team, and faced off against some of Marvel's biggest characters. Following the death of Wolverine, Laura even briefly adopted her father's alias and headlined the all-new Wolverine series that launched as part of Marvel's all-new, all-different reset back in 2015. In the current market, CGC 9.8 copies are down approximately 25% when compared to the 2021 average sales price. 9.8s are averaging just $1,155 over the last 90 days after averaging out at $1,546 across 115 sales in 2021. CGC 9.6 copies have a 90-day average sales price of $614 compared to a $754 average sales price in 2021. On the raw side, recent raw sales really make me want to encourage you to just buy a slabbed copy. There are multiple recent sales of high-grade raw copies right at $500, and somebody even dropped $600 on a raw copy on June 10th. The next day, somebody bought a CGC 9.6 for just $15 more. Financially, unless you're certain you're going to pull a 9.8, that $600 purchase is going to leave you underwater on this book. So yeah, buy a graded copy if you feel the need to pick this one up. The cover homage is one of the oldest tricks in the book for a cover artist. It's a great way to connect with readers who remember or love the original, and then hopefully you can springboard off of that and get them to pick up your new book. And as is the case with our runner-up book, it's a way to modernize one of the most iconic comic book covers ever published. Haunting the number 2 spot is Batman 227. This December 1970 issue of Batman is one of the most iconic Batman covers in the history of the title, and is Neil Adams' reimagining of Bob Kane's legendary Detective Comics 31 cover. Tech 31 has long been on every Batman fan's shortlist of favorite covers. Unfortunately, it's incredibly scarce and rarely trades hands. With a total of 99 graded copies of the book on the census, you can understand why it demands a pretty penny on the occasions when it does actually come up for sale. The most recent public sale took place in November 2022 for a CGC 1.5 copy that sold for $66,000. It may be the third cover appearance of Batman, but it's not uncommon to hear collectors rank this one higher than Detective 27 when it comes to their favorite Bat cover. Adams' take on the cover is actually significantly more realistic than the cover that inspired it, and his use of gray tones along with a generally darker palette really build upon the original design and give it a more menacing feel. The cover story, which was titled The Demon of Gothos Mansion, was written by the late great Denny O'Neil and was penciled by Irv Novick. Over time, Batman 227 has steadily climbed in value as its desirability amongst collectors has remained strong for over 50 years now. Testament to this is the fact that in a time where Bronze Age keys are reeling value-wise, Batman 227 is maintaining increases in value when compared to 2021 average sales prices in all grades with the exception of 3.0 and 4.0. Mid-grade copies are generally trailing behind their 2022 values though, which could be indicative of them being worth looking at as sales in the higher grades continue to climb. This upward momentum in the higher grades could have coattails that will trickle down into those mid-grade copies. there's a fair amount of price compression from 3.5 to 6.5, as less than $200 separate the 90-day average sales prices of all the encompassing grades. CGC 7.5 copies are currently averaging out at $1,088 over the last 90 days, and 7.5 seems to be where the value really jumps for this issue. You know the drill, dark colors on a cover makes for a tough book and high grade. CGC 6.5 copies are averaging a sales price of $600 over the last 90 days, clearly showing where the line between more plentiful mid-grade and harder to find higher grade copies sits. Mid-grade raw copies are currently running in the neighborhood of $400 and appear to be selling for very similar prices to those of their graded peers in grade. Do with that information what you will. Topping the top 10 comics for the summer of 2023 is a book that is as sad as it is scary, as final as it is frightening, and as cautionary as it is creepy. Our number one book is Tales from the Crypt, number 46. It's no surprise to anybody familiar with the channel that I'm a massive EC Comics fan, and so rare are the opportunities that I have to include them in my top 10s. So let's get into this one. Cover dated for February-March 1955, Tales from the Crypt 46 is not just the final issue of the title, but it was the last published horror comic and just one of two new trend issues that actually saw print for the February-March cycle for EC. The Jack Davis cover was intended to be used for the debut issue of a new fourth horror series which would resurrect the previously used Crypt of Terror title. Instead, it was the death shroud for the final issue of one of the most influential movements in the history of comics. As depressing as that is, it's a fantastic werewolf cover, and it's probably my favorite Jack Davis cover on the title. Inside the issue, we find story art from Davis, George Evans, Joe Orlando, and Graham Ingalls, with stories from Carl Wessler, Bill Gaines, and Al Feldstein. Also included in this issue was a one-page article titled In Memoriam, in which the editors explained that if readers were ever fortunate enough to read the issue, that it would be the last, and that they were planning to launch a new trend in the new year. Unfortunately, the same forces that led to the destruction of EC Comics would rear their ugly heads again and again as innocent American children would go on to be seduced by things like rock and roll, rap music, video games, and other corrupting influences over the years. Tales from the Crypt 46 had been riding a decent bump that was lifting a number of pre-code horror issues over the last year or two, but it's recently seen a few sales at more modest prices, which is why I wanted to feature it here. While other pre-code horror titles may have more shocking covers, Tales from the Crypt has more name recognition than nearly all the rest of them combined thanks to the HBO show, movies, Saturday morning cartoons, and vast array of licensed materials, and for that reason, issues of Tales from the Crypt are simply always in demand. As with most pre-code horror or Golden Age books, there's not a lot of data to go off of when it comes to sales, but we do have 3 sales for this book in the most recent 90 days to look at, which is pretty good. In June 2023, 2 CGC 4.5 copies were sold about a week apart. The first one went for $780 and the next copy sold for $900. After 2 copies in the same grade sold in March 2023, the first for $1,150 and the second for $1,440. That's over a 20% drop if you take the narrowest margin between the 4 sales in just 3 months. The most recent sale for a graded copy was for a CGC 3.5 earlier this month and it sold for $500. Following up a previous sale in that grade from November 2022 that went for $1,250. Now that's a 60% drop in 8 months, but let's be honest about this, that's likely going to be an outlier and somebody just got a hell of a deal there. If raw copies are more your style, a couple of low-grade copies have sold on eBay in recent weeks for between $300 and $400, which seems to be a pretty reasonable value for this book. I get asked about getting into pre-code horror books fairly regularly, and while I don't have any magic or maybe silver bullets as this issue might require to help you get started in the genre, I think the best advice is to research the vast array of titles that are out there and pick the one that appeals to you. That said, maybe try to avoid the titles that have the heavy hitters within them if building out the entire run is your goal, because they're murder. The summer series of top 10s are in the bag. The fall series is going to kick off in August, but in the meantime, I'm excited to get to some non-top 10 content that's been building up while I've been playing catch up here. I've got some cool new comic-centric products I want to share with you. Additionally, I recently hit up an awesome SpiderMan exhibit in the area, and who knows what else I'll come up with between now and then. Thanks to you all for your continued support. I appreciate the time you invest in watching the content, and I enjoy reading your comments with each new video. Enjoy the rest of your summer. We'll be back when the pumpkin spice breaks free, here with more top 10 comics lists. Collect responsibly, and I'll see you in the next video.